All right. So thank you so much for taking some time out of your day today to join us here on our webinar. Just to introduce myself, my name is Jonathan Brandeo. I am the Director of Learning and Development here at MLB Wholesale. And today, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be walking through MLB Wholesale's Fannie Mae Non-Permanent Resident Program. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how you can recognize the opportunities where this program can help you serve borrowers who otherwise might be overlooked. So when we're talking about these non-permanent residents, we're talking about borrowers who are legally present here in the United States, but they just don't have that permanent resident status. And for you as a broker, as a loan officer, the opportunity here is really kind of expanding the number of borrowers that you're able to help and grow your own personal pipeline, while at the same time making sure that you're fitting within that clearly defined eligibility and documentation requirements. So as we're making our way through our presentation today, we're going to cover the basic program parameters, the immigration documentation, the different eligibility categories of how we split it up here at MLB, and then finish with kind of a overall breakdown of kind of a process flow that you should apply when looking at these types of borrowers. Because we know the number one goal here at MLB is making lives better. And we want to give you and the borrowers that you're working with the opportunities and the tools necessary to achieve home ownership and to really support that mission. So let's jump into things and let's really start with why having a defined non-permanent resident program really matters in the first place. So there is a kind of, let's say, three different important reasons why this type of program matters. The first thing is going to be that expanded opportunity, because not every borrower that's pursuing home ownership within the United States is a current U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. There are legally present borrowers here that are living, working, earning income, and building their careers that still have a path to move forward under traditional conventional financing. This creates another opportunity for you as a loan officer to go ahead and say yes. So instead of saying no to those people that come across your desk, you could go, actually, I have something for you. I have something that we can work on together. The second benefit to here is those clear guardrails. This is not a program where we simply look at the immigration status and decide whether someone qualifies. There are still going to be defined requirements based around their credit, LTV, DTI, documentation, employment, and of course, their income. And that brings us to that third benefit, which is consistent review. The program organizes those different immigration statuses into different categories to make it a little easier to understand if you can move forward to the next step. Some processes and some statuses can just go through a traditional, standard, conventional process flow. Some require an exception from senior management here at MLB. And then there's going to be certain situations where those types of eligibility is just completely not eligible at all. That structure allows you to get a much clearer roadmap so that when you're talking to a borrower that fits within the bucket of this type of borrower, we know upfront as soon as possible if we're able to really kind of move forward, or maybe they might be ineligible at this time. The biggest thing that could really take away here as a loan officer is to not just automatically assume that if a borrower is either eligible or ineligible is simply based on the fact that they're a non-permanent resident. Just because they're a non-permanent resident doesn't mean they're ineligible for programs. It just means we need to do maybe a little bit extra research to determine on what type of resident are there, what type of immigration paperwork do they have, and that will determine, of course, their eligibility based on that alone. Now, before we get into each individual immigration category, let's first establish kind of the basic underwriting framework that's going to apply to all of the borrowers that fit within the non-permanent resident. Biggest thing here, and that you saw at the beginning, kind of the main point of the presentation, this is only available under Fannie Mae. So it's conventional, but Fannie Mae would be the only option available when working here at MLB. Now, of course, other than that piece, we want to make sure kind of the other main highlights that apply to all non-permanent resident borrowers with MLB. The maximum LTV is going to be 95% with a 620 minimum FICO. From a DTI standpoint, we want to have a maximum of 40 on the front end and 45 on the back end. And from an automated underwriting standpoint, we do need an approve eligible. So you're not going to be able to do any type of manual underwrite on this type of situation. So you want to make sure that up front, other than, of course, getting that immigration documentation, you want to make sure that that borrower fits within the basic parameters. So think about those questions you're going to ask your borrower when you have that first conversation with them. Do we have an acceptable credit? Can we fit within that LTV requirement? Does the DTI work? Do we get that approve eligible through AUS for DU specifically? If those fundamentals don't work, it doesn't matter what type of immigration status they have, they're just not going to be able to work because they need to fit within these on top of that immigration status paperwork. Now, behind those specific parameters, those specific numbers, there are some other additional core eligibility requirements that we need to make sure we always are keeping in mind. Now, as we're narrowing down things down even more specifically, this is for primary residences only. So keep that in mind with a maximum of 2 units. So 1 to 2 unit properties, primary residence only. When it comes to maximum loan amounts, we're going to fit within the current conforming loan limit. So whatever that is for the year that we're working in. Of course, right now we're in 2026, and believe it or not, we're very close to 2027 already. So whatever the current conforming loan limit, or it's going to be 999,999. Whichever number is the lower number is going to be the maximum on these types of borrower situations. High balance is not eligible for your non-permanent borrowers. It is a maximum of 3 borrowers allowed on these types of transactions, and every borrower must have a valid Social Security number on top of that immigration paperwork. So those are kind of the biggest pieces here. The main thing I want to emphasize here that you can actually see is that a listed immigration status does not replace the standard program requirements. That's probably the most important concept that we're going to talk about, or at least one of them throughout our entire presentation, is that the borrower might have an immigration classification that fits within the eligible of what we can accept here, but the overall file still needs to meet a Fannie Mae basic guidelines, following your traditional Fannie Mae guidelines. So it doesn't override those. We're still going to be referencing the same guidelines that any other borrower using Fannie Mae is going to apply to. So it still has to meet credit, income, employment, property, AUS, LTV, DTI, all the same that any other Fannie Mae borrower will need to abide to and go off of. So no matter what that immigration status is, you're still going to look at it the same as any other Fannie Mae borrower. With that kind of main foundation of the last 2 slides really established here, we really need to kind of move into one of the biggest and most important pieces here, of course, documenting that that borrower is available and in the United States lawfully. And that is going to be based on that immigration documentation. And the borrower has to be able to demonstrate a lawful presence here in the United States through that acceptable documentation. So there's some examples that are available. An example of a card on the slide we're showing right now of that employment authorization document. That's currently referred to just traditionally as an EAD document. A valid work visa, also a passport is acceptable with appropriate entry documentation, passports containing an I-551 evidence, and other immigration documentation just supporting that lawful presence. You'll notice that the sample EAD that's right here on the right side of the slide, the key idea here is that we're not relying on just a verbal explanation of immigration status. We need to show that document kind of trail when it comes to that. There's also a very important rule when it comes to timing. There is a 60-day expiration rule. So if that borrower's documentation is going to expire within 60 days of closing, the file does need evidence of renewal or documentation that the renewal request has already been filed. So keep that in mind. So when you receive an actual immigration document, don't just verify that it's valid today. check what that expiration date is going to be immediately because we want to make sure that we don't have any types of issues based around expiration dates because that's going to be able to determine on what additional steps need to be taken, that things are not going to expire prior to closing or too close to closing and within that 60-day window that Fannie Mae requires. When you're identifying those non-permanent resident borrowers, gathering those immigration documents as early in the process as possible is going to prevent those unnecessary delays that would pop up later in the transaction if we didn't grab those and kind of get those out of the way in the beginning. Now, of course, once we know and we have that documentation in hand, we're able to read and look at the documentation that they have. The next step is determining that the category that there is listed on that documentation, that it fits into a category that is eligible for financing through MLB Wholesale. Now, the first category is pretty straightforward. These is category one. Everything in category one is automatically eligible for MLB's Fannie Mae program. So this is showing lawful presence, applicable work authorization, income continue. The income's going to continue. The remaining program requirements have been kind of satisfied there. It's the straightforward group. These are the borrowers that we will just look at and go, okay, they're eligible for this program as long as they meet all the other requirements that we talked about on the previous slides. So some examples here you'll actually see here 8, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So those are the ones that we can say, okay, you're good to go. We can use the Fannie Mae non-permanent resident program. Of course, doesn't mean it's just automatically approved. They still need to show document lawful presence. They need to have active work authorization when applicable. We need to see that the income is going to continue. And of course, the borrower still has to satisfy all the standard requirements of the program and Fannie Mae's guidelines that we talked about earlier. So category one is mainly think of this is something that can go forward and proceed under a standard review path, the standard process that we do for any other borrower here at MLB, assuming, of course, that everything else works and is structured within Fannie Mae's guidelines and we're good to go. Now, you'll notice that you also have your employment-based visas that you may encounter. Now, these you don't necessarily need to memorize, of course, every single visa classification. What I would remember, the biggest piece I would remember here is the statement that you see here in the bottom right corner, is that visa classification alone does not just establish loan eligibility. That's a recurring theme that I've talked about so far in our presentation, is that seeing, for example, the H-1B on a document does not automatically mean that they are eligible. We still, of course, need to validate the documentation, determine that their work authorization is active, establish that employment and income, obtain that approve eligible through DU, and of course, satisfy all the rest of the parameters that we've talked about. The best approach here is to collect this documentation. And if you are unsure, reach out to our team. Reach out to your account executive. Reach out to our client services team. Send us those scenarios and say, okay, can you take a look at this? This is something that MLB is comfortable with. I just want to be sure. It's always the best course of action to reach out to us and let us guide you, let us point you in the right direction to make sure that you're comfortable and confident in moving forward with the situation and documentation that you've gathered from your borrower so far, so that we can say, actually, you know what? We're good to go. As long as we get these other things, this is something we're comfortable moving forward. Go ahead and register this loan, and we'll work with you kind of moving forward. But of course, not every immigration status is as straightforward as the ones that are in the category one that we've been talking about so far. Some of these scenarios are things that we can still work with, but they do require an additional higher upper management level of review. And that's going to be our category two options. Category two is where it's especially important to don't just assume that they can work with us. These are borrowers that may be eligible, but they do require that an underwriter manager approve them in order for us to move forward. So, and that is on top of the traditional documents of lawful presence and continued work authorization. So those examples are like the C8 for pending asylum applicants, C9, 10, 11, 19, 33. Those are situations where we need to look on a case-by-case basis on if that is something we are comfortable moving forward with and giving a specific exception to that borrower to proceed. That's the biggest thing is notice that difference between this and what we talked about in category one. Category one are going to be your borrowers that we are perfectly acceptable and are eligible to receive financing with MLB. Category two requires that upper management review and an exception in order for us to allow that to proceed. A big thing here to keep in mind is that once our team has gone ahead and reviewed all the documentation that's required and determined whether or not that borrower can qualify for our programs, you need to be aware that once that borrower is approved, so let's say they are approved, there is going to be a 150 basis point LLPA applied to your pricing on all of these category two borrowers. So because of that risk to these particular visas, that would give that extra 150 basis point LLPA added to pricing if our team goes ahead and approves that for a specified exception on that particular borrower. So keep that in mind and consider that when evaluating the overall transaction and if that's going to work for your borrower if MLB says, actually, we're good to go and we can accept this. Now, when it comes to determining what we will or will not accept on a case-by-case basis for each of the ones you're seeing here under category two, there's not a specific list I can share on what makes a specific borrower eligible versus others, why we would give an exception in this case compared to the other. It's all going to be based on the documentation that you provide to us on a case-by-case basis. It's going to be specific to that borrower. There's not a kind of a general overarching answer that will apply to every borrower. It's going to apply across the board. So once again, if you have a borrower that fits within a category two category that we're showing here, first step, reach out to our team. Send us the details of your scenario. Send us any documents you might have gathered from your borrower so far. Let us take a look at those and we will let you know, okay, this documentation, we can accept this. Or we can say, okay, we have this documents, these things are good, but can you provide a little bit more details for us? Can you ask for this? Can you grab these types of things? And that's going to be something that will be different for every single borrower. It's not really a catch-all answer that will say this is definitely the exception is going to go through, or this will definitely not. It's really all kind of dependent on that specific borrower. And then on category three, these are 100% ineligible. So no matter what, we will not accept these at all at MLB in those cases. So like, for example, your F1 or M1 student borrower that doesn't have a valid EAD, all of that. Other ineligible situations include denied visas. If it was a denied visa, a denied EAD, any type of denial that they might have received on their immigration documents, those would not be eligible. We also cannot proceed where any type of visas, EADs, immigration statuses, work authorizations, if they've been expired and there's no valid extension that's been applied. If the borrower is not able to document a lawful presence, we can't proceed. We need to make sure that we have current work authorization and when employment income is used. And we need to make sure that we have all of those. If there's a change of status, we need to make sure that we have the proper documentation that shows continuation and no expirations on that. These are all situations, like I mentioned, no matter what, there are no exceptions to the ones listed on the slide right now. These are completely ineligible when working with MLB Wholesale. So if something has been expired, been denied, or cannot be documented, that is very different from a borrower who just simply has an unfamiliar immigration classification. So those expired, denied, or undocumented can create that eligibility problem, and we're not going to be able to proceed. So keep that in place, keep that in mind when it comes to looking at these situations. So when we're looking at everything here, how do we actually pull this all together when an actual loan scenario hits your desk? And the next slide gives us a very useful kind of 5-step process that we've come up with. Now, this slide, and of course, the presentation I've been using today, everybody here will receive a follow-up with a link to the presentation slides that I'm using today, but you can also always go to MLBwholesale.com. There's a direct link to the presentation slides that you can download, review all the information I went over today, and kind of use that as a great reference tool. But this is a great reference, this particular slide, because it turns everything that we've discussed today into an actual repeatable process whenever you're working with these types of borrowers. So step one, this is kind of thinking from a loan officer perspective. Step one is confirm that core eligibility. Before everything else, confirm that basic loan structure. Is this a primary residence? Does the property type work? Do we have acceptable credit? Are the LTV and the DTI within the program parameters? Do we have that approve eligible through your automated underwriting? That's the first thing to do because there's no benefit in spending significant time analyzing immigration documentation if the underwriting loan doesn't meet basic Fannie Mae guidelines. So that's the first step from there. Now, of course, once it has gone ahead and met those basic Fannie Mae guidelines, met the overlays that we have here at MLB, the next thing is to validate their immigration documentation, to confirm lawful presence, work authorization when applicable. The borrower's social security number is required. The expiration dates on their documentation, making sure we remember that 60-day expiration rule that we discussed earlier. And if any type of documentation is approaching expiration, make sure that you're going ahead and documenting the evidence that the borrower is in the process of renewing or extending the date on that documentation. Now, of course, as we're reading that documentation, we're identifying which category that borrower fits into. Do they fall into category 1, 2, or 3? Remember, category 1 follows a traditional straightforward path, the same as any other traditional Fannie Mae borrower. Category 2 requires senior management review and an exception to be provided in order for us to proceed. And then, of course, category 3 are your borrowers that are just 100% ineligible for any type of program here at MLB. And if the status is not specifically listed, don't just assume that it's ineligible. Remember that if a specific status is not listed, those automatically get put into category 2, and our team would take a look and see if there's an exception that's needed in order for us to proceed. And then, of course, step 4, confirm their employment and income continuity. Making sure that that income is going to keep coming in. We need the required employment history, confidence that the qualifying income is reasonably expected to continue into the future. Because immigration eligibility and income eligibility are the two kind of most important cruxes to ensure a borrower is eligible when it comes to that. And then really step 5 there is that from an operational standpoint, if something in the documentation does not line up, or if you encounter a scenario that doesn't just straightforward and right away clearly fit into the framework that we talked about today, don't just assume, escalate it. It's better to always ask those questions before you submit the loan to us, early in the transaction, than discover a problem when we're trying to get close to that closing. This 5-step process that I just went through can help save a tremendous amount of time for you and help you identify which borrowers are going to be able to confidently move into the world of home ownership. And the good news is that you don't have to do all those questions and navigate through all this all by yourself. I've mentioned a few times already, as you've gone through, reach out to our team anytime you have any type of question, whether that be just general questions about MLB Wholesale or they're specific to the stuff that we are talking about on today's presentation. Our client services team specifically is available to assist you with questions, including scenarios that you may not immediately know which category a borrower falls into. You can email our client services team directly, clientservices@mlbmortgage.com, or you can either call or text our client services number during our business hours, and our team will get back to you as soon as possible with additional assistance. Of course, on top of that, you'll find additional MLB program information along with videos and presentations through the resources linked on this slide, and of course at mlbwholesale.com. I would especially encourage you to use all the tools and resources that we've created for you as a great scenario resource. So if you have a borrower with a particular immigration document and you're unsure whether it works, send that to us. Send it as soon as you have it. We would much rather help you evaluate an opportunity than just have you assume that a borrower cannot qualify and potentially lose a loan that may have actually had a path forward. The purpose of all these resources that we're continuously creating for our partners is to make it easier for you to identify solutions and to be able to serve more families. So at the end of the day, let's wrap everything up with kind of the biggest takeaway from today's presentation. As we close everything, the biggest thing I want you to take away is that a non-permanent resident does not automatically mean that they are ineligible for financing. These are legally present borrowers with valid employment authorization, stable income, and strong credit profiles who have that opportunity to get Fannie Mae conventional financing through the program we talked about today. Of course, I don't expect you to memorize every single visa, every single detail that we went over in today's presentation. The opportunity really here is to recognize that opportunity, collect the appropriate documentation, understand the basic guardrails, and let our team be here as that tool, as that resource whenever it needs additional review, or you just need a little bit of extra assistance to once again boost your confidence and make things clear. The 5 questions I want you to walk away with today and remember is, does the borrower meet the basic Fannie Mae program eligibility requirements? Can we document lawful presence? Can we document work authorization when applicable? And which category does that borrower fall into? And at the end of the day, can we establish stable employment and continued qualifying income? If all those pieces come together, we have another opportunity to create home ownership for that borrower. And ultimately, that is exactly what our mission here at MLB is. And that's what this program is designed to accomplish, to give you more tools to serve your partners, your borrowers, your realtors, and more opportunities to say yes, and more ways for us to continue making lives better.